Okay, ladies and gentlemen, take a seat, get situated. We're going to get started again. For those of you who weren't here prior to the beginning of the first hearing, some ground rules. The way the hearing is going to proceed is the applicant will present their case first, their witnesses, their exhibits, their testimony. They'll be subject to cross-examination and questions from the board. Then the township will present their case, exhibits, testimony, and the applicant's counsel can cross-examine the township representatives. Then we'll open it up to members of the public that want to testify for or against the application. It's not a question and answer session. So the applicant, its witnesses are not going to be subject to questions from the audience. If you're going to testify from the audience, you're going to be sworn in, you're going to give your name and address to the stenographer, sworn in, and you're going to go on the record. At the end of both the applicant's case and the township's case, and hearing from members of the public, we will close the record, and as before, under Pennsylvania law, the board has the right to take legal counsel from their attorney. They can do that in private, which is, if you were here for the first hearing, is what we did. We recessed, came back, and rendered our decision in public. So that's how we're intending to proceed tonight. We have a hard cutoff of 10:30. If we go past that for any reason, we will have to schedule a second hearing, which isn't typical, but it's possible. So with that, I mean, Mr. Graham, just a reminder, you're still under oath from the first hearing, okay? Do you want to present the case, and then I'll have the applicant? What's our case number for this one, Mr. Graham?
The case number for this one is 2024-03.
In the matter of 2024-03, is the applicant present?
Yes.
I'm going to turn over the mic, and we're going to have to do some back and forth sharing here unless you have a really loud voice. But here you go, David.
Good evening. My name is David Schutte. I'm a partner with the law firm of Troutman Pepper Hamilton Sanders LLP. We represent the applicant, NOBPA LLC. With me this evening is Gary Bolus, who's the managing member of the applicant, and Eric Brinzer and John Schick are both number 2, and they are the civil engineer and traffic engineer for the project. As a housekeeping matter, I provided to all of the members of the board and to the zoning officer on behalf of the township a copy of all the exhibits that we'll be presenting this evening. I'm going to walk you through those really quickly just to let you know what they are. Exhibit 1 is the vesting deeds to the 4 properties that make up the subject property. Exhibit 2 are the tax cards to those properties. Exhibit 3 are 3 purchase agreements and amendments to those purchase agreements to evidence the applicant's equitable ownership in the property. Exhibit 4 is an existing conditions plan. I apologize for the small size of that we do have the existing conditions plan on a board blown up as well that we cannot refer to through the hearing. Exhibit 5 is the rendered site plan, and that is also on a board that we will refer to during the hearing. Exhibit 7 is a proposed recreation fields plan, and that is also on a board which is on an easel in the front of the room right now. Exhibit 8 is map 11 of the Eastern Adams County Joint Comprehensive Plan showing the road designations of the roads within the township. Exhibit 9 is a lighting plan, Exhibit 10 is the first 22 pages of the traffic impact study. The entire traffic impact study, which comes in at about 832 pages, is in a binder that I've provided to Mr. Baranski. Exhibit 11 are traffic improvement plans. We have boards of those as well to describe those in detail. Exhibit 12 is the curriculum vitae of Mr. Brenzer, and Exhibit 13 is the curriculum vitae of John Schick.
David, let me stop you right there. Just reminded me, I have to mark the application as Township Exhibit 1, and that application contains Exhibits A through G, which I'm assuming some or all are duplicative of your binder.
Somewhat, yes.
Mr. Graham, do you have any other township exhibits besides the application at this time?
No, sir.
Mr. Graham, just to refresh the board's knowledge, the property was properly posted with respect to tonight's hearing?
It was.
And advertised.
You weren't here. We went through the whole advertising posting for both hearings.
All right, well, let me give you a little bit of background to the project, and then we'll move on to our witnesses. The applicant is the equitable owner by virtue of agreements to sale of 4 parcels. Existing parcel 1, if you take a look at the existing condition plan, existing parcel 1 is 51.03 acres and is owned by Lester E. Myers Trust, and that's over here. Existing lot 2 measures 67.58 acres and is owned in fee by the Gertrude Scholl Estate, and that is right here. That's on the eastern side of State Route 94. Lot 3 is 54.62 acres, and existing lot 4 is 10 acres, and they front Route 30, and they are owned in fee by Dean and Lori Ann Lawrence. The total acreage of the subject property is 183.23 acres, 51.03 acres fronting the western side of Route 94, and 132.2 acres fronting the eastern side of Route 94 and the northern side of Route 30. The deeds and purchase agreements, exhibits 1 and 3 in the exhibit booklets, evidence the fee ownership of the property as well as the applicant's equitable ownership. The applicant desires to re-subdivide and develop the subject property as shown on this rendered plan. With proposed lot 1 measuring 151.03 acres, located on the western side of State Route 94. And that lot we're proposing to develop with a 103,680 square foot warehouse. Proposed lot 2 is on the eastern side of State Route 30 and State Route 94 and north of Route 30, and that lot will measure 132.69 acres and be developed with a 621,000 square foot warehouse. Proposed lot 3 is 2.34 acres with a 5,000 square foot unspecified commercial building. Proposed lot 4 will be 3.61 acres, also with a 5,000 square foot unspecified commercial building. And existing lot 5 will be 2.56 acres and will continue to include the pre-existing residential building. All of the subject property is located in the commercial district in the township zoning map. As such, the proposed development and proposed uses of lots 3, 4, and 5 do not require any zoning relief from this board. Warehouse uses are permitted in the commercial district by special exception under section 150-63M of the township's zoning ordinance and subject only to the criteria found in section 150-98DD to justify a special exception approval. So for lots 1 and 2, we are requesting this board to grant special exceptions to allow for the warehouse use, and we'll be presenting evidence to satisfy the criteria in section 150-98.DD to justify the special exceptions. Additionally, on lot 1, the unique shape of the lot and environmental constraints make it practically impossible to place a building of any commercial viability on the front yard setback line as required of non-residential buildings in the commercial district under section 150-65A of the zoning ordinance. To the extent that this section applies to lot 1, in light of some ambiguities that we'll discuss, the applicant is requesting a variance from that section as well. Quick note on the special exception application and the general law of special exceptions. Many a judge has said that a special exception is neither special nor an exception. Special exception is a permitted use. Provided that an applicant for a special exception satisfies all of the specific objective criteria of the zoning ordinance, the special exception application must be approved unless the objectors prove with substantial evidence that the use, if permitted, will adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the community in a way not normally generated by that particular use. Also, courts have consistently held that a mere increase in traffic that is typical for a use permitted by special exception is not grounds for denial of an application. In the case before us this evening, warehouses are permitted by special exception in the commercial district. The specific criteria for warehouses is found in the zoning ordinance, as I said before, in section 150-98DD. So if the evidence presented satisfies those objective conditions, then this board must approve the application unless the objectors prove that the proposed warehouse uses will be more adverse to the community than a typical warehouse. If there are no questions for me before moving on, I'll present my first witness, who will be Gary Bullis.
Can you take a moment, David, and differentiate this application from your first application? Because I think we need a little bit on the record that there is a difference, which just justified you coming back.
Absolutely, yes.
I heard you once before.
Yes, absolutely. So an application was submitted for this subject property by the applicant in 2023. I believe our hearing was in September of 2023, somewhere around there. And that application requested 4 variances from certain site design criteria that was in both the specific criteria for warehouses as well as the site criteria in the commercial district. We revised those plans for submission to remove 3 of the 4 variances that were being requested. Those 3 variances that were requested, that are now not being requested, include placing loading docks on the side of the building that is closest to the nearest residential building. We're no longer requesting a variance for that. We're no longer requesting a variance for two-way traffic within a parking lot. And we're no longer requesting a variance for encroachment in the wetlands riparian buffer requirement to place the driveways.
Is the applicant's position that this is a substantially different application?
Absolutely, yes. In addition, since the submission of that application and the submission of this application, the Township's Board of Supervisors has amended its zoning ordinance to change the warehouse requirements from into now the same requirements as truck terminal in section 150-98DD.
Okay. And your application is under the new ordinance?
Absolutely, yes. And we plan on presenting the evidence necessary under the new ordinance.
Let the record reflect that the solicitor makes a legal determination that this application is substantially different than the prior application, which allows the applicant to proceed. Okay, David, go ahead.
All right. Our first witness is Gary Bullis.
Stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or affirm?
I do.
Gary, can you provide your full name and business address?
Gary Bolus Jr., business address 201 King and Prussia Road, Suite 650, Radnor, PA 19087.
And what is your relationship to the applicant and NOBPA LLC?
I'm managing member.
Okay. And is everything that I said during the background description of the subject property and your intended development of subject property true and correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And did you retain RITU for civil engineering and traffic engineering on this project?
That's correct also.
And what attracted you to the subject property for this project?
The underlying zoning is for warehouses, fronts onto arterial roads 15 and 94, and that was the main reasoning for us being involved with the project.
That Route 30 and 94, you mean?
Yes, 30 and 94, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The access was to 15 and 83.
Okay.
Excuse me, we're not going to take comments from the audience. You need to be quiet, this is a hearing.
Thank you.
Now, as you know, Section 150-98DD includes a number of performance standards, which I'm going to tick through with you real quickly to ask you if you're willing to abide by them as a condition for approval. First is 150-98-1. Just confirm with us that the intended use is for warehouses and not for wholesale buying clubs open to the public.
That is correct, yes.
And 150-98-DD9, if this application is approved, would you agree to a condition that all vehicle service and repair activities are to be conducted completely within an enclosed building?
Yes.
And section 150-98-DD9 also If approved, will you agree to a condition that any outdoor storage of parts, equipment, lubricants, fuels, or other materials used or discarded in any service or repair operations will be sufficiently screened from adjoining roads and properties such that the same is not visible from the adjoining roads and properties?
Yes.
And section 15098DD10. If approved, would you agree to implement an anti-idling policy with a minimum idling time per truck of 10 minutes?
Yes.
And under section 15098DD12, if approved, will you agree to a condition that all leases for the property will prohibit the storage of trash, garbage, refuse, explosives, or flammable materials, hazardous substances, or similar items in manners that the storage of these materials would violate any federal, state, or local law?
Correct.
And section 15098DD16C, if approved, will you agree to a condition that any gates or other barriers used at the entrance to the parking areas will be set back and arranged to prevent vehicle backups onto adjoining roads during peak arrival times?
Yes.
Gary, one thing I do know that something that there will be some excess land. If this project is approved, there will be some excess land that's generally undevelopable in the northwest corner of Lot 2. Preliminarily, what would you like to see done with that excess land if this plan is approved?
Well, originally, I believe we're showing that as parking. However, as sort of my business mantra, I like to provide as much open space as possible, walking trails. I just think it's sort of a good civic duty if we're going to be developing property. And this opportunity arose where we have an additional 4 to 5 acres here. And I thought the township would perhaps like to have this for, we have a ballpark shown, soccer field, a pavilion, some parking, and some walking trails. And that's shown right up there on that board right there in front of everybody. So if anybody has any questions about that at some point later on after the meeting, I'd like to address that with them as well.
Thank you, Gary. I have no further questions for Gary. Does the board?
We cross-examine Mr. Graham.
No, sir.
Our next witness then is Eric Brinzer.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or affirm?
I do. Gary? Yes, sir. Please clarify something with you real quick.
Mr. Brinzer, please provide your name and business address.
Yeah, sure. It's D. Eric Brinzer. I'm with Ritu Associates at 5031 Richard Lane, Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania.
And what is your profession, Mr. Brinzer?
Sure. I am a registered landscape architect in the state of Pennsylvania. I've been working for a civil engineering firm for over 25 years.
And what is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in landscape architecture from West Virginia University.
And you mentioned that you are registered and in the state of Pennsylvania. Are you in good standing with that registration?
Yes.
And does your registration require continuing education?
Yes, it does.
And are you current with your continuing education credits?
Yes.
And I direct you to Exhibit 12 in the exhibit booklet. Is this a true and correct copy of your curriculum vitae?
Yes, it is.
And are all of the projects referenced in this document projects that you had actually worked on?
They are.
And in your role with Ritu as a landscape architect, do you prepare and review land development plans and site plans?
Yes.
And have you testified as an expert in land development and landscape architecture before?
Yes, I have.
I move that the board find Mr. Brinzer's testimony as an expert in land development and landscape architecture.
Mr. Graham, do you want to cross-examine Mr. Brinzer on his expertise?
No, sir.
So admitted.
Thank you. Mr. Brinzer, did you prepare the site plans and other documents related to this project?
Yes.
Could you walk us through the site plan for Lot 1?
Yes, I'm going to refer to the rendering. So Lot 1 is on the west side of Route 94. We have a 103,680 square foot warehouse proposed there. It is single loaded with the loading docks on the southwest side of that structure, the furthest away from the residential property to the north. We have a parking lot which is separated from the truck traffic off of Route 94, and access is coming off of Kaplan Court, which is the cul-de-sac adjacent to this property. So all access will be coming from there, no new access onto Route 94.
Does the design of Lot 1 meet all of the dimensional and design requirements under Article 11 of the zoning ordinance, which regulates the commercial district?
Yes.
And as you know, Section 150-98DD of the zoning ordinance has a number of requirements for the design and performance of warehouses. I think we're going to go through each of them as they relate to this, the development of Lot 1.
David, I have a question.
Yeah.
Your application refers to HH.
Yes.
You keep saying DD.
HH was the old ordinance. We were unaware of the change in the ordinance until after the application was submitted, but the change in the ordinance happened before the application was submitted, like a week or two before the application was submitted. We were unaware of that.
So reference to HH in your narrative and your application, what should I change that to?
DD.
Okay.
Yes, your zoning officer was kind enough to send us a copy of the ordinance that changed the criteria after we submitted the application.
That was nice.
Yeah.
Mr. Graham, do you have a copy of that? Can I see that for a second? My books, I don't know what year my books from. Can I have this?
Yes.
Go ahead, David, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Not a problem. Section 150-98DD3 provides that the subject property must have a minimum of 300 feet of contiguous road frontage along an arterial or collector road. Is Route 94 an arterial or collector road?
It's an arterial.
And I'm going to turn your attention to section, where is that? To exhibit 8 in the exhibit booklet. Which these were tabbed. What is exhibit 8 in the exhibit booklet?
This is a map from the Joint Comprehensive Plan, the Eastern Adams County Joint Comprehensive Plan. It shows the functional classification of the state roads, and it depicts Route 94 in green, which is minor arterial, and Route 30 in red as other principal arterial roads.
And is Lot 1's frontage on Route 94 300 or more feet?
Yes, it is, and it exceeds 300 feet.
Section 150-98 DD4 requires a 200-foot setback along any boundary line that separates the site from a zoning district that permits residential development or from an existing residential property. Is that setback line shown on the detailed plan, which is included in the exhibit booklet, as Exhibit 6?
Yes.
And just to make the record clear, because I know that the detailed plan in the exhibit booklet is very hard to read, is Exhibit 6 in the exhibit booklet identical to the plans that were submitted with the application?
Yes, the design is the same.
Were there any minor changes to the two plans, just so the board is clear?
Yeah, let me just show them on the plan I have.
Absolutely.
Okay, so very quickly, on the rendering, you'll see we had one minor clerical change on the existing lot, for existing Lot 4 and proposed Lot 5 to show as residential. They were listed previously as commercial, so that was just a simple text change for that lot alone. No change to the design of the site at all. And on the sketch plan, which I believe...
We don't have a board for that.
You don't have a board for that?
Yeah, that's what they have in front of them.
What you have in front of you, I see that the special exception criteria, we replaced the old criteria with the new criteria that we were just presented from the zoning officer, so that's the only other change to make sure that's on the exhibit, so that is on there now. And no other changes
That's
to the plan.
different than your application.
Correct. We just clarified those.
To be clear, nothing substantive as to the plan has changed from the application plans to what we're calling Exhibit 6.
Correct.
And back to the 200-foot setback, are there any buildings proposed within the 200-foot setback?
No.
Section 150-98 DD5 requires all structures to be set back at least 50 feet from any street right-of-way line. As to Lot 1, is the setback line shown on the detailed plan?
Yes.
Are there any structures within that 50-foot setback?
No.
Section 150-98 DD6 requires a 40-foot buffer yard along the exterior lot lines except for vehicular and pedestrian access areas traversing the yard areas. Am I correct that much of Lot 1 has a naturally existing buffer on the property lines?
Yes, it does.
And where a buffer does not exist, is one planned?
Yes.
Can you show us where that is on the rendered plan for Lot 1?
Yes. So I'll say the northwest corner of this property, you can see there's a large section of woodland. That's the existing buffer. The proposed buffer then you can see in dark green, proposed landscaping to fill in the gap from that woodland up to the road and then all along the road frontage as required.
Comprised of what?
It would be the landscaping the materials that are required by the ordinance for that buffer. It's a mixture of trees, evergreens, and shrubs.
Any berms?
We were planning actually on placing berms along that section, and also, we're not there yet, but on Lot 2, along the frontage up there as well.
Fencing? Any fencing?
Berms and landscaping is proposed at this time.
Okay.
Under section 150-98 DD7, does the proposed screening contain various types of sizes of plant species arranged in such a manner to establish an effective barrier? Will a more detailed buffer and landscaping plan be included with the lot's land development plan under the Township subdivision land development plan approval process?
Yes, it would.
And does the proposed screening and buffering also meet the requirements of zoning ordinance section 150-65B?
Yes.
Section 150-98DD8 requires that loading and unloading docks be located on the side of the building furthest removed from the closest residential structure. Where is the closest residential structure to the building on Lot 1?
I'm going to refer to the rendering. The closest residential structure is to the north along Route 94, and it is beyond the 200-foot buffer, which is shown. The building is currently 200 feet from that property line, and the closest building is approximately 260 feet from our proposed building.
260 feet.
Approximately 260 feet.
And where are the loading and unloading docks located on the building on Lot 1?
They are on the south side of the building.
And is that the side of the building furthest removed from the closest residential structure?
Yes, it is.
And while we're discussing loading areas, does the loading area shown on the plan for Lot 1 meet all of the loading area standards in section 150-120 of the zoning ordinance?
Yes, it does.
Section 150-98DD11 provides that truck and rail access and operations shall not conflict with the convenience and safety of vehicular traffic and parking. First, am I correct that there are no rail operations contemplated on this plan?
Correct, there are no rail operations.
Can you describe the truck access to the building?
Yes. So as I mentioned before, access to the site is off of Kaplan Court, off the cul-de-sac. We have a separate truck access to coming off of the bulb of the cul-de-sac that would provide access to the building for truck traffic. And we have the parking, vehicular parking separated from that off a different access drive, also off of Kaplan, so they are separated.
And does the truck access and operations conflict, or are they inconvenient or unsafe in any way?
No.
Section 150-98DD13 requires the submission of a detailed site plan showing building dimensions and placement, internal circulation, landscaping, and other pertinent design information needed for the complete review of the project. Did you supervise or prepare the detailed site plan, which was part of the application and also Exhibit 6 in our as it relates to Lot 1?
Yes.
Just to be clear, is this Exhibit 6?
That is, that as we just explained, that's Exhibit 6 with the two changes that Mr. Brenzer said were made in the Exhibit 6, which is in the exhibit booklet, which is hard to read because it's very small.
This is amended Exhibit 6.
That is unamended Exhibit 6.
Unamended Exhibit 6.
Yes,
Okay.
that is the one that came with the application.
Okay. And that up there is the only copy of amended Exhibit 6.
No.
No.
That's what we call the rendered site plan. That is Exhibit 5 in the exhibit booklet. Exhibit 6 in the exhibit booklet is the detailed site plan, which is identical to the application, except for the two text changes that we described.
So there's no large-scale amended Exhibit 6?
No, but we can provide one.
All right,
If-
because this
if-
one in here is...
No, I get that, yes.
All right. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. Section 150-98DD15 requires the preparation of a lighting plan in accordance with the requirements of the Hamilton Township Lighting Ordinance. Are you familiar with Chapter 89 of the Hamilton Township Code of Ordinances titled Hamilton Township street and site lighting ordinance?
Yes.
And did you supervise the preparation of the lighting plans as they relate to Lot 1, which is Exhibit 9 in the exhibit booklet?
Yes.
And does the lighting plan, as it relates to Lot 1, meet those standards required under the township's lighting ordinance?
Yes.
Section 150-98DD16 relates to parking requirements and references Article 17 and Section 150-120 of the zoning ordinance. Article 17 sets forth the general parking, loading, and stacking regulations, and Section 150-120, which is within Article 17, regulates the off-street loading areas. Have you reviewed and are you familiar with both Article 17 and specifically Section 150-120?
Yes.
As to Lot 1, how many parking spaces are required under Article 17?
67.
And how many parking spaces are provided on the proposed development?
81.
Are the parking areas and loading areas on Lot 1 compliant with those ordinance sections?
Yes.
Is all of the truck parking and staging for Lot 1 proposed to be accommodated on site at all times?
Yes.
Is there any proposed truck parking or staging along Route 94 or any other public road?
No.
Is there any proposed parking, storage, or loading of vehicles associated with Lot 1 proposed to be outside of Lot 1?
No.
Is there any satellite parking, storage, or loading lots proposed?
No.
Section 150-98DD16E requires one loading space at each loading dock. Are those loading spaces proposed and shown on the plan?
Yes, they are.
Section 150-98DD16E also requires one truck parking or staging space for every 2 loading docks. Are those additional truck parking or staging spaces proposed and shown on the plan?
Yes, they are.
Let's now move on to Lot 2. Can you please, using the rendered site plan, which is Exhibit 5 and on the board, would you please walk us through the site plan and design of Lot 2?
Sure. So Lot 2 has frontage on Route 30 and on Route 94. We have 2 access points going into the site off of each of those roads. The access off of Route 30 would be a boulevarded entrance that would provide access into the proposed warehouse as well as entrance from the rear into the 2 commercial lots. And the proposed warehouse on this side of the site is 621,000 square feet. This is also a single loaded structure, so we have all the loading docks on the north side of the building. We have the truck parking area on the south side of the building. We have employee parking split between both ends of the building. We do have a circular drive going around there for the trucks so that it does not have to enter any of the parking areas, just to give you an example. The access drive coming from Route 94 does bisect and go between, that's probably the wrong word, goes between all the wetland buffer areas. So we're only impacting those with roadway crossings, which is a permitted activity. Same thing off of the access off of Route 30. Other than that, we're able to stay out of the wetland buffers with this design.
Last time there was a bridge or something, wasn't there?
There is still a culvert of some sort going to have to cross the main stream here that comes under Route 30. So I anticipate that just being a box culvert or something similar to that when we get into design. There'll be some other smaller culverts as well, but those are just very small
I was going to say about the
drainages.
commercial, 2 lots
Yes.
out front.
Yep.
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
there-
Mr. Stowe, I didn't hear you.
There's 2 commercial lots out front as well that will have to cross the wetlands there.
Correct.
So just before we go on to Lot 2 any further, just to summarize, with respect to your proposed use or your proposed application for Lot 1, you are asserting you don't need any variances.
Correct.
You're asserting that for Lot 1, you can meet all the requirements for a warehouse under the ordinance as testified to by Mr. Brinzer.
Yes,
Okay, so the variance you need is Lot 2, which you're about to get into.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
We're going to deal with the special exception for Lot 2 first, and then go to the variance. Okay. As to Lot 2, with the exception of the section for which a variance is being sought, does Lot 2 meet all of the dimensional and design requirements under Article 11 of the zoning ordinance, which regulates the commercial district?
Yes.
Now let's go through the specific special exception criteria for Lot 2. Section 150-98 DD3 provides that the subject property must have a minimum of 300 feet of contiguous road frontage along an arterial or collector road. I think we've already established that both Route 94 and Route 30 are arterial roads. Is Lot 2's frontage along those roads 300 or more feet?
Yes.
Section 150-98 DD4 requires a 200-foot setback along any boundary line that separates the site from a zoning district that permits residential development or an existing residential property. Is that setback line shown on the detailed plan, which is both Exhibit 6 and the larger version in the application?
Yes.
Are there any buildings proposed within that 200-foot setback?
No.
Section 150-98 DD5 requires all structures to be set back at least 50 feet from any street right-of-way line. Is that setback line shown on the detailed plan of Exhibit 6 and of the plans with the submitted application?
Yes.
And are there any structures within that setback?
No.
Section 150-98 DD6 requires a 40-foot buffer yard along the exterior lot lines except for vehicular and pedestrian access traveling or traversing the yard areas. Similar to Lot 1, is there an existing natural buffer for most of this lot?
Yes.
And where this existing natural buffer is not present is a 40-foot buffer yard planned.
Yes, it is.
Can you show us on the rendered plan where that is?
Yes. So you'll see on this plan, there's a lot of existing vegetation along the streams, which will be retained as much as possible with the exception of the road crossings. To the rear, which is to the north, there's also a variety of woodlots with existing vegetation that are going to remain. And then we are proposing to provide additional landscape buffers, again, with the berm and the landscaping that's required within the ordinance. We have that up on the northwest corner. And then again, on the southeast corner, we are providing additional buffer between the truck parking and the road frontage. So we kind of get a double buffer between the existing vegetation and the planted buffers.
Section 150-98 DD7 requires that the proposed screening contain various types and sizes of plant species arranged in a manner to establish an effective visual barrier. Will a more detailed buffer and landscaping plan be included with the lot's land development plan under the Township subdivision land development plan approval process?
Yes, it will.
And Does the proposed buffer and screening meet the requirements of section 150-65B of the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Section 150-98DD8 requires that the loading and unloading docks be located on the side of the building furthest removed from the closest residential structure. Where is the closest residential structure to the proposed building on Lot 2?
Going to refer back to the rendering. The closest residential structure to the proposed building on Lot 2 is the residential structure along Route 30. It's approximately 600 feet away from the building, and the loading docks are located on the north side. The residential property is on the south side of the building.
And is that the side of the building furthest removed from the closest residential structure?
Yes.
And while we're discussing the loading areas, does the loading area shown on the plan for Lot 2 meet all of the standards for loading areas under section 150-120?
Yes.
Section 150-98DD11 provides that truck and rail access and operations shall not conflict with the convenience and safety of vehicular traffic and parking. Again, similar to Lot 1, are there any rail operations contemplated for Lot 2?
No.
And can you please describe for us the truck access to the building and how it relates to the vehicular parking on the property?
Sure. So truck access to the site could come from Route 30 or Route 94 in this case. We do have a circular drive that goes around the building for trucks to be able to access that without conflicting with the vehicular parking spaces, so there's no conflict there. And then we have the parking area for the trailers in the front of the building.
And with that design, is there any conflict or in any inconvenient or unsafe way?
No.
Under section 150-98DD13, it requires the submission of a detailed site plan showing the building dimension and placement, internal circulation, landscaping, and other pertinent design information needed to complete the review of the project. Does the detailed site plan in Exhibit 6 and the site plan, the identical site plan on the application, do those meet those elements?
Yes,
And did you supervise the preparation of those plans?
I did.
Section 150-98DD15 requires the preparation of a lighting plan in accordance with the requirements of the Hamilton Township lighting ordinance. I already testified that you're familiar with the Hamilton Township street and site lighting ordinance in Chapter 89 of the Hamilton Township Code of Ordinances. Did you supervise the preparation of the lighting plan as it relates to Lot 2 and in Exhibit 9?
Yes,
And does this lighting plan as it relates to Lot 2 meet the standards required under the township's lighting ordinance?
yes it does.
Section 150-98DD16 relates to the parking requirements and references Article 17 and Section 150-120 of the zoning ordinance. As we stated before, you are familiar with both Article 17 and specifically Section 150-120. How many parking spaces are required under the zoning ordinance?
233,
And how many parking spaces are provided?
258.
Are the parking areas and loading areas on Lot 2 compliant with Article 17 and specifically section 150, 120 of the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Is all of the parking and staging for Lot 2 proposed to be accommodated on site at all times?
Yes.
Is there proposed parking or staging along Route 94 or any other public road?
No.
Is there any proposed parking, storage, or loading of vehicles associated with Lot 2 proposed to be outside of Lot 2?
No.
Is there any satellite parking, storage, or loading lots proposed?
No.
Section 15098 DDE requires one loading space at each loading dock. Are those loading spaces proposed and shown on the plan?
Yes.
15098 DDE requires one truck parking or staging space for every 2 loading docks. Are those additional truck parking and staging spaces proposed and shown on the plan?
Yes.
That completes the requirements for the special exception for the warehouse use on Lot 2. In addition, on Lot 2, we're requesting a variance from section 150-65A, which regulates non-residential buildings in a commercial district and reads, quote, "Buildings shall be constructed at the front yard building setback line." Quote. Mr. Brinzer, how do you interpret that ordinance requirement?
So my interpretation of that is that a structure must be at the building setback line. There is no leniency to push the building any further back than that front yard setback.
And why would that be a requirement in the commercial district?
Many times, there's a desire to have the parking behind the structure as opposed to right up on the street frontage. So a lot of times the buildings are up against the street, that frontage of the structure, so that you kind of hide the parking behind.
And that's more of a common thing or a common desire for office, retail, and those types of commercial buildings, correct?
Correct.
Is that regulation often seen applied to warehouse uses?
No.
And why not?
It's generally not desired to have a larger structure like that right up on the roadway for a variety of reasons, visually and also from an accessibility standpoint for truck movement. Being that close to the road can be problematic.
And in your professional opinion, does Section 150-65A conflict with Section 150-98 DD5, which requires and permits warehouses to be set back 50 feet or more from a street right-of-way?
Yes, it does.
As your understanding under Section 603.1 of the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, that any ambiguity or conflict in a zoning ordinance must be read in favor of the property owner and against any implied extension of the ambiguous restriction.
Yes.
And if Section 150-65A is applied to Lot 2, where would buildings need to be located on the property?
I'll refer to the plan.
Please do.
So along Route 30, that would require this structure to be placed directly up along Route 30 at the 50-foot line, or along 94, again, right at that 50-foot setback line.
And are there environmental and regulatory challenges that would make placing any building in compliance with, in the compliant locations nearly impossible?
Yes, in this case, along both of those roadways, both 94 and Route 30, you can see, as we have depicted on the graphic rendering, there are blue lines depicting streams. There's also wetlands along both of those locations, which would prohibit a structure from being placed in those locations to meet the setback, that 50-foot setback criteria.
And does the zoning ordinance also have a riparian setback from streams and wetlands that would prohibit any disturbance of land within that setback area.
Yes.
How far back are you proposing to set the building if you can't set them at the building setback line?
In order to get the structure and its facilities back away from the wetland buffer that's in the front, we're approximately 566 feet, plus or minus, from Route 30. That's the closest we are to either of those buildings, roadways, I'm sorry.
566.
Approximately, yes.
Versus 50. So that's
Correct.
your variance right there. 500 and some feet.
Correct. And are there unique physical circumstances or conditions peculiar to Lot 2 that creates an unnecessary hardship to meet the requirements of 150-65A?
Yes, those streams and buffers that I mentioned.
And is it also due to the unique shape of the property as well?
Yes.
And because of these conditions, is it impractical, if not impossible, to reasonably develop such a large property in compliance with 150-65A?
Yes.
Was the hardship created by the applicant?
No.
Will the grant of the requested variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood?
No, I don't believe so.
In fact, would the larger setback for a warehouse-type use, would that be more beneficial?
Yes.
Why?
Just as I mentioned earlier, due to the size, the height of the buildings and the size of the structure, to get them out of the visual, from the visual points from the roadways, it is just more aesthetically pleasing to have them further away from the road. Sorry.
And will the grant of the requested variance substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of the adjacent properties or be detrimental to the public welfare?
No.
Similarly, would a warehouse being 50 feet away from the roadway versus being 500 feet away from the roadway, would the one being 500 feet away from the roadway actually be better for the development of adjacent properties?
Yes, it would.
And is the variance being granted the least modification necessary to feasibly develop such a large property?
Yes.
Has all of your testimony been given to the best of your professional opinion?
Yes, it is.
And in your professional opinion, will the grant of the requested special exceptions and variances adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the community?
No.
Do you have anything else to add?
No.
I have no further questions for Mr. Brinzer. Open up to the board.
Mr. Graham, cross-examine Mr. Brenzer.
No, sir.
Gentlemen of the board, questions for Mr. Brenzer? Okay.
Our next witness is John Schick.
Yeah, sure.
You want to stay standing and raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or affirm?
I do.
Mr. Schick, please provide your name and business address.
My name is John Schick. I work with Ritu Associates. Our address is 3020 Columbia Avenue, Lancaster, PA, 17602.
And Mr. Schick, what is your profession?
I'm a senior project manager in our transportation division.
And do you have any registrations in engineering?
I have an EIT. I am not a PE.
And as an EIT, do you take continuing education classes?
No, it's not required as an EIT, but I do take continuing classes.
And is your registration as an EIT in Pennsylvania in good standing?
Yes, it is.
And what is your educational background?
I have an associate's degree from Penn State University in mechanical engineering technology, and I have a bachelor's of science in civil engineering from Youngstown State University.
And direct your attention to Exhibit 13 in the exhibit booklet. Is this a true and correct copy of your curriculum vitae?
Yes, it is.
And are all of the projects referenced in that document projects that you have worked on?
Yes, they are.
And have you prepared traffic impact studies for review by PennDOT or by townships or both?
Yes, I have.
How many traffic impact studies do you think you have prepared?
It's probably close to 200-300.
And have you testified as an expert in traffic engineering before a court or before a board of, or before a zoning hearing board previously?
Yes, in front of both, actually.
I move to for the board to qualify Mr. Schick as an expert in traffic engineering.
Mr. Graham, any cross-exam as to Mr. Schick's qualifications?
No, sir.
He will be admitted as an expert in traffic.
Thank you. Mr. Schick, did you prepare the traffic impact study, which is the 823-page document sitting in front of the board solicitor?
Yes, I did.
Are we going page by page?
No, we will not.
Okay, go
I'll
ahead.
go with 22 pages.
Okay. And is Exhibit 10 in the exhibit booklet a true and correct copy of the first 22 substantive pages of the traffic impact study?
That is correct.
And to your knowledge, was this traffic impact study in its entirety electronically submitted to the township zoning officer approximately 2 weeks ago?
I believe so, yes.
And for the board and audience's education, what is a traffic impact study?
A traffic impact study is a higher level type of traffic study. There's typically two types of analysis. There's a traffic impact assessment, which is a lower impact type of report, and then there's a traffic impact study, which covers a much larger area of intersections and study periods. And that's determined based on the size of the development and the amount of traffic that it's generating.
And section 15098DD 14 of the zoning ordinance, which is one of the special exception requirements for warehouses, requires that the applicant furnish a traffic impact report prepared by a professional traffic engineer in accordance with section 120-36 of the Township Subdivision Land Development Ordinance. Does the traffic impact study submitted meet the standards required under section 120-36 of the Township Subdivision and Land Development Ordinance?
Yes, it does.
And does the traffic impact study also meet the standards of PennDOT under its highway occupancy program?
Yes, it meets under, PennDOT has a policies and procedures for traffic impact studies dated September 22nd. So it was also prepared in accordance with those criteria.
And again, just for the board and the audience's education, what is the highway occupancy permit program?
Highway occupancy permit process, also known as HOP, you'll hear me say HOP frequently, is a process that is required to go through whenever there's an access onto a state highway. It's a process that PennDOT regulates, controls. It's their highways. They regulate the access, the design of those access points, and any improvements along the state highway. The HOP process for a particular land development like this is a three-stage type of operation. The first is once a project's identified and there's access onto a state highway, it's called what's the TIS scoping stage. It's the initial meeting with PennDOT, the township, neighboring townships, the county MPO, and the development team to discuss the project, discuss points of access, discuss the amount of traffic it's going to generate, and to identify the study area, the number of intersections, the time periods of the day that those intersections will be studied, the days of the week those intersections will be studied, and other parameters that go into the study, such as other off-site developments that might be approved yet undeveloped, or in the process of being constructed, or have approval, but again, haven't begun their construction. All those items are discussed at the scoping meeting with all the parties that I mentioned. At the end of the day, the idea is we get an approved TIS scope from PennDOT as well as from the township. At that point, we're able to proceed to the traffic impact study. So once all the parameters, everything is agreed upon how the study is going to be done, we take it to the next level. The next level, again, is the 836-page document in front of you. That's the result of the scoping meeting and what was required to be done. Again, that involved going out doing traffic counts on specific days, specific times of the day, specific days of the week, and running through the 7 or 8 different types of analyses that PennDOT requires you to go through for approval. That study has been approved. It has not been submitted to PennDOT yet, since PennDOT will not review or receive a traffic impact study until the zoning is in place. They don't want to proceed, they don't want to move forward with a study to review if the zoning's not in place, because if you don't have zoning, they don't issue you your access to the state highway. So the next step, as I indicated, is the TIS process. Again, the process would go through PennDOT, they would review, the host municipality has an opportunity to review. You have neighboring municipalities here, they have the opportunity to review and offer comment, and also the MPO has an opportunity to review and offer comment on the study. Once all that's taken care of and you have an approved TIS, the TIS basically lays out the roadmap of what the improvements are. And again, we'll go through those as I proceed here. But that list of improvements will take it to the next step of the HOP. The HOP is the Highway Occupancy Permit Plans. That's going to create a large set of documents and drawings, basically the construction plans to go out and build those improvements. Again, that goes through a very detailed engineering design, every little detail, traffic signal timings, anything involved with improvements, access, turn lanes, etc. All that gets approved, review again by the township, the MPO, and PennDOT. So it's basically a 3-step process to get through, to get to the final where you have an HOP in your hand, which allows you to go out and build those improvements in the state right away.
And I think you mentioned this when you were discussing it. I just wanted to clarify this. Is the township and its staff involved in the HOP approval process, and how?
Yes, they're involved for all 3 facets of it. They were involved in the scoping meeting itself with PennDOT. It was a virtual Teams, excuse me, Teams meeting held. They will have the opportunity to review the study, offer comment, go back and forth until we have an approved study. As we go through the HOP process, they'll have the same opportunity to review those plans, stormwater reports, signal timings, signal plans. Anything that goes to PennDOT has to be reviewed and accepted by the municipalities.
And I'm correct that both Route 94 and Route 30 are both considered arterial roads and state roads by PennDOT?
Yes, both are.
And in PennDOT world, what does an arterial road mean?
PennDOT classifies roadways based on the federal FHWA classification. It starts at the highest level as in interstates. So for instance, I-81, I-83, the Turnpike are all the highest level roadway all the way down to a local road. An arterial roadway is essentially a lesser category, and it connects smaller or larger cities and towns. So if you think of Route 30, 94, 30 connects to York, to Gettysburg, all the way out to 81, into Lancaster. 94 goes up to Route 15. It goes down south into Maryland. So again, they're roadways that provide more I'm not going to say regional access, but more localized, semi-regional type of access.
And did you do traffic counts on those roads?
Yes, we did actual tube counts, and then again, it was part of what was agreed upon in the scoping application, where road hoses were set out on the roads, both on 30 as well as 94. We collected data for an 8-day period. We collect speed data or volume data in each direction, compiled at 1-hour increments. We also look at classifications to determine the types of vehicles that travel back and forth, all the way classified from a motorcycle up to large combination type trucks. And we also gather speed data to determine what the running speeds are at specific locations. Those locations we did both on 30 and 94. We're in the approximate location where the site access points were proposed.
And is all of the data that you collected in the full traffic impact study that has been provided to the township?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and in the page 4 of the traffic impact study and 5 of the traffic impact study, it has tables reporting crash summaries and crash data. Can you explain what that means and what your study of the crash data reveals?
Yes. As one of the requirements from the scoping process was to evaluate crashes at the intersections that we studied. Again, it was indicated we counted 10 different intersections, and PennDOT requires us to look at crash data, reportable crash data. And a reportable crash is considered where a vehicle is damaged and needs towed, or else there's an injury at the crash site. They require us to look at the most recent 5-year history at those intersections. The most current 5-year history they have in their database right now is from 2018 to 2022. As you can see on tables 2 on both pages 4 and 5. It breaks down the data for Route 30 along the segment. PennDOT makes us look at the entire segment of Route 30, or of that particular segment is also 94. And then we look at the individual intersections. As you can see, on average, the intersection of York Road and Carlisle Pike, for instance, in 2018, there was 4 reportable crashes. In 2019, there was 3, 2023, 2021, 1, and 5 in 2022. If you look at the remaining intersections, it varies anywhere from 1 to, looks like a maximum of 3 or 4 crashes during any one of those years at those intersections. There is a separate crash analysis report that was prepared. I do not believe it was submitted with, it was?
Yeah.
It was submitted with this. Again, due to the legalities that PennDOT places, PennDOT gives us the right as a consultant engineer to access their database to get the crash data. However, it's not for public consumption. So it's a separate report not included in here. So what you see here is basically the summary of that data. It doesn't include, we get the resumes that describe what the accident was, if it's an angled crash and determines who hit who or whatever. So that information was completely separate. It's a separate crash analysis. Again, it's not for public consumption, but submitted as an appendix or an addendum to the traffic study.
And did the existing crash data, did it reveal that that these intersections are more dangerous than other intersections with similar traffic counts?
That's correct. PennDOT puts out a report every year that identifies crash rates, and crash rates for intersections based on the amount of cars that go through, the width of the pavement, the number of lanes, and the ADT at the intersection. So again, each one of these intersections was reviewed individually. It's in the report, and it comes out their specific crash rates. And the crash rates for the actual crashes at the intersections are lower than what the state required rates are. So again, we look at fatalities, we look at crash rates, and it's all based on each individual intersection's characteristics.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you did do some, traffic counts at certain locations and traffic counts at the intersections that are being studied. I believe, just to be certain, if we look at Table 3, just for reference, and that starts on page 5 and ends on page 6, are those all of the intersections that were studied as part of the scope of this traffic impact study?
That's correct. These are the intersections that were agreed upon by PennDOT, the county, and the township.
Now, as part of a traffic impact study, do you develop models for the traffic conditions for the future with and without the development of the project? And how do you do that?
Yes, we do. Again, PennDOT requires, because of this size of the development, the traffic, they require us to do a study 5 years beyond when the completion of the project would be done. Our estimate is the project would be operating, assuming approvals, in the year 2026. So basically, PennDOT says we have to go out to 2031 and analyze the traffic conditions under 2031 conditions. So what that means is we take our base volumes from our traffic counts that we did in 2024, and we grow those by a certain percentage that PennDOT has. PennDOT generates for the entire state, if it's rural or if it's urban, a growth rate every year. So they apply, we take that growth rate, which is 0.45% per year. We grow our existing volumes up to 2031 conditions to create what's called a no-build scenario. So no project comes in and nothing else happens, just natural background growth of traffic in the area, it's going to reach a certain level. So it's a pre-development, post-development type of condition.
And do you take other proposed developments into account for determining those future conditions?
We do, and again, those were discussed at the scoping meeting and agreed upon by all the parties at that time. We were required to include 4 separate developments, and those developments were, there's the Chesterfield residential development, which is a proposed 70 single-family dwelling unit residential to the north in Reading Township. Currently, I believe there's 18 units built, so we basically took the remaining units that weren't built, took traffic from their traffic study and added it into our model in addition to the background growth. We also included the Cambrian Hills residential development, again, which is the proposed 133 single-family detached dwelling unit, again, south on 94. We included the Summerfield residential development, which is, again, a 238 townhouse and a 78 single-family detached dwelling unit, again, south of York Road on 94. And we also included the Hanover Retail Holdings commercial development, which is a proposed mixed-use development. There are 3 sites. The sites include Site A, which is an automotive, it includes 2 automotive dealerships of 23,000 and 18,000 square feet respectively. Site B includes a fast food restaurant with a drive-through of 5,000 square feet. It also includes a 10,500 square foot restaurant and also a convenience store of 6,500 square feet with 14 fueling positions. Site C of that development includes a fast food with drive-through of 5,000 feet and another automotive dealership of 18,000 square feet. So we got the traffic studies from those particular developments and added all that traffic into our model to basically come up with our, I'll call it no-build base volume conditions.
No build, meaning you guys don't build.
Correct.
And how are the proposed access points on lots 1 and 2 into state routes 94 and 30 determined?
Access was a very large part of the discussion during our scoping stage with PennDOT, the township, as well as the county. Also, from the last hearing we were at, we heard the township's direction on where we believed access should be. From the township's engineer, we heard where the access needs to be on 30. The access, as we were instructed, was opposite of Stanley Drive to make that to a 4-way intersection. PennDOT was not going to allow another access point on 30 unless it aligned at Stanley. So they pretty much forced us to that particular location. The location on 94 was really a result of the last hearing. As Mr. Brinzer testified, there was certain environmental, there was wetlands, as you can see, and there was buffer areas that we were encroaching upon to bring the access out. PennDOT's instruction was to get that access point as far north as possible on the site frontage. By doing that, we were encroaching and crossing into some of the wetlands and the buffer areas that we would have needed variances from the board. Again, not receiving those variances, we were forced, as you can see where that access point comes out, it basically comes between two areas where there's buffers between the wetlands and the environmental area. So that is our only location along 94 where we can actually bring the driveway out that would not require any type of variances. And again, PennDOT was only going to allow us one access point onto 94. So when we left PennDOT, we knew we were going to get one access point on each one of the roads. We knew on the access on the other side that PennDOT wasn't going to give us any access on the 94 on the west side. So again, we were forced to come out to use Kaplan as our points of access to that particular warehouse.
Is that where the Dollar General?
That's correct. That's correct.
We also moved it because of the neighbors.
That's right. One of the other reasons too was, again, the location previously was further to the north, and we heard from residents, or the resident that lives across the street, that they were concerned with the driveway coming out directly opposite of their particular residence, that there would be headlights shining directly onto their property, and again, it was going to be right in front of their property. So again, that was another reason that, again, we wanted to push it further to the south.
And is site distance a consideration, and how is that calculated?
Yes, in order to have an access onto a state highway, PennDOT has specific criteria, as does the township, for site distance. And the site distance, there are 4 different elements that we look at. So if you picture, if you're pulling out of a driveway, you have to look left, and there's a site distance that you need to meet based on what the speed limit is, what the running speeds of the traffic are, what the grade of the road is, and grade and speed limit, and the number of lanes coming at you. So we have to looking to the left and then looking to the right. So if you're making a left turn out, you have to look to the right, and each one has its own special dimension. If you're making a left turn into the site, you got to make sure there's adequate sight distance coming from behind so you don't rear end somebody. You have enough time that you can stop if that person is in the travel lane. Likewise, if you're waiting to turn left into a driveway, you have to be able to see the car approaching you. Is there adequate sight distance based on the speed limit and the grade that you can turn in with the gap? So there's that 4 sight distance. Now for a warehouse, because we have truck traffic, PennDOT holds us to a standard that we have to review the sight distance based on trucks. Trucks sit higher, they sit back further. So we have specific criteria and dimensions we must meet for truck traffic. Again, PennDOT is going to classify this access as a local road because it connects 2 arterial highways and it serves at least 3 different uses internally. So it may be a driveway by definition, but when PennDOT permits this, they're going to permit as a local road. And a local road has a higher standard even than driveway criteria for PennDOT. Again, they go by what's AASHTO, which is a federal publication. So site distance criteria is completely different than what PennDOT. So the tables in the report, there's table 4 and table 5, it displays all the different site distances. The minimum site distance that's required, there's an intersection site distance required, and there's PennDOT has a desirable site distance. So both intersections meet all the criteria based on the prevailing conditions of the roadways, the grades, and the speeds.
What is trip generation, and how is that determined for a warehouse?
This is the fun part that keeps you awake. Trip generation is the method that we use to determine how much traffic a particular land use can generate. The ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, has a manual. It's called the Trip Generation Manual. We're currently in the 11th edition of it. The manual goes back into the mid-'80s. It's been around. It's compiled from hundreds of studies that traffic engineers, municipal planning organizations, companies submit to the ITE to generate trip rates. So what they do is they develop specific trip rates based on a certain variable of a property. And to be specific, for a warehouse, they look at what the square footage of a building is. So for instance, somebody would go out and they would actually do a traffic count at an existing warehouse. They would count all the entering and exiting vehicles, and then they would come up with a trip rate based on the floor area of that particular warehouse for a morning peak hour, and an afternoon peak hour, and then for Saturday peak hours. There's multiple time periods that they look at. But in general, trip rates are always defined based on the morning peak, because that's the worst case scenario when there's the morning commuting traffic. They also look at the afternoon peak condition, which again is 1 hour between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock. And for this particular development, because we have 2 commercial uses, PennDOT made us look at Saturdays. Again, Saturday's not a major generator for the warehouse, but for the purposes of this study, we assumed 2 restaurants, high turnover type restaurants, as the uses. So that tripped us into doing Saturday analysis at the 10 intersections also.
The fourth development you were asked to study, what did you call that? You said it was gonna have a drive-through restaurant and other fun stuff.
That was the Hanover Retail Holdings.
Where is that?
It's located to the south on 94. It's not in Hamilton Township.
It's at the intersection of Hanover Road and Carlisle Pike.
Across from Toyota.
Toyota and Subaru. That
Nothing's there
commercial,
now, though.
it's a commercial,
Okay,
yeah, there's a subdivision plan in for it.
okay, all right, go
There's
ahead.
a subdivision, and then there's also the commercial piece. They're kind of 2 separate projects, but it's one larger
Okay.
project.
And does table 7 on page 13 of the TIS calculate the trip generation for this site?
Yes, it does.
And what is access classification?
Just to go back one step to the trip generation, the ITE also provides a breakdown of traffic being generated for specific land uses. And warehousing is one of the newer land uses that's been updated in the most recent 11th edition. And as part of this update, they actually give trip generation for trucks as well as passenger cars. So our traffic modeling includes a breakdown of trucks versus passenger cars. So in table 7, you'll see that for each warehouse, it breaks it down to passenger cars, for trucks, and then the total. And then for the other 2 uses were the high turnover restaurant uses. As asked for a driveway classification, PennDOT classifies driveways in 4 different classifications. There's a low volume driveway classification. There's a medium volume driveway. There's a high volume driveway, and then there's a local road. Those are based on the ADT, and the ADT stands for the average daily traffic that the entire site generates over a 24-hour period. So for this particular development, if you go to table 10 on page 15, it lists both locations of the proposed driveways, one on York Road, SR 30, one on Carlisle Pike at SR 94. Both of those access are proposed to be full access driveways. That means full movement in, left and rights in, as well as left and right turns out. Both of those driveways actually fall under what's considered as a low volume driveway. Now, I know I said before it's going to be as a local road, but PennDOT still classifies it as a certain volume criteria because each level has certain dimensional requirements for the design of the driveway. So the ADT for the York Road driveway is 1,221 trips per day. So that's roughly 610 vehicles entering and 610 vehicles exiting on that particular driveway over a 24-hour period on Route 30. The Carlisle Pike access would be 979, which roughly is 490 vehicles entering and exiting over a 24-hour period of an average daily weekday.
Is that all semis?
No, that's total vehicles. If you go back to Table 7 on page 13, you'll see the column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8th column over, it says ADT at the top. So for the warehouse on Lot 2, that will generate a total of 677 trips per day of passenger cars. So divide that by 2, that would be the number of vehicles. And then 343 trucks, and divide that by 2, so 170 odd trucks per day. And again, that's out of the entire site. And that would be divided up over 2 access points. Likewise, for the 103,000 square foot warehouse, the same thing, 139 passenger cars a day and 63 trucks per day. So that table gives you a complete breakdown of the daily as well as during the highest hour of the day, the peak hour, what the trucks and passenger cars are.
And what is the concept of level of service for an intersection, and how are they graded?
Without getting too much into the weeds of it, level of service is very similar to when you were in school, the grade you got on your report cards. You went from A to F. Again, A being excellent, F being failing. Level of service is calculated and defined based in terms of delay. How long you sit at an intersection, how long you sit at a signal, how long you sit at a specific turn lane. That's how level of service is defined by delay. For the most part, anything with level of service, E is considered marginal by PennDOT. As time has gone on, they realized that traffic has increased, and level of service D was before the break line between satisfactory and unsatisfactory. Now level of service E is considered as marginal, and level of service F is still, of course, as failing. To give you an idea of what a level of service, if you're at an unsignalized intersection, the average delay, if you sat there more than 50 seconds at a particular, and it's typically to stopped approach, if you sat there longer than 50 seconds, that would constitute a level of service F. At a signalized intersection, it's increased to 80 seconds. So again, if you're sitting at a particular signal in a left turn lane, a through lane, or a right turn lane, or if it's one combined lane, anything over an 80-second delay is considered failing. Again, it goes as low. Level service A is 10 seconds, so you can tell on table 11, it gives a breakdown of each level and what the corresponding delay is for it.
And then, moving to, I guess, you had already explained to us that you're projecting the traffic for both years, 2026, based on a base, and then the projected with the development, and projected with the development without improvements that we'll discuss in a second, and the projected with the development with the improvements. That's on table 12. Can you let us know what the in bold there is ILOS? What does that stand for?
ILOS stands for intersection level of service, and I think we'll refer to table 13, which is actually the 2031. We're required by PennDOT to do an opening year analysis, but really all the improvements, all the impacts, what everybody evaluates is based on our final design year. So we do the 2026 just to meet the requirement of PennDOT, but actually table 13 with the 2031 is the actual levels of service and results that all the improvements and impacts are based on for the study.
And can you just walk us through the levels of service for the different intersections? Just summarize them from table 13.
Sure, I won't drill into. PennDOT has criteria that we have to look at, and the way they evaluate if improvements are required is to look at the overall intersection level of service. So that ILOS is the number and the factor that PennDOT looks at. PennDOT has allowed us over the years to have a 10-second increase in delay. So if we look at our no-build scenario, and that's what I said before was our base years that are grown with the growth rate and adding all the traffic from the other area developments to an intersection. That is our base year condition. So if you look at the table 13, you'll see across the top header, it lists the 3 time periods that we had to look at. Again, the morning peak hour, the PM peak hour, and the Saturday midday peak. If you look at the next row of headers, it has existing. That is the existing level of service today based on our 2024 counts. If you look at the base for each one of those time periods, that is the 2031 no builds condition. So that's if this development never occurs, everything else that is proposed to occur in natural background, those are the resultant levels of service at those intersections we counted. When you get to the next column to the right, the projected, that is if we add our site traffic to the model, to the intersections, and model it. And then finally, the last column is to project it with improvements. Like I said, if you compare, and let's use the intersection of 30 and 94, because really, all the other intersections met the 10-second criteria. We did not exceed any increase of delay over 10 seconds on any of the other 9 intersections. So if you look at the signal of 94 and 30, if you get down to the ILOS, and if you look at the base condition for the AM peak, that level of service was a D at 49.7 seconds. When we add our site traffic, it went to a level of service E at 61.8. So there you can see we exceeded the 10 seconds. 10 seconds would allow us up to 59.7 seconds. We exceeded that to 61.8. So because of that, we have to mitigate our impacts in order to get the level of service below the pre-development. We just can't take 10 seconds off. We have to actually get it below what the pre-development conditions were. So again, with the proposed improvements we'll talk about, we're able to get that to a level of service D at a 48.6. So basically, PennDOT holds the bar and they say, okay, you can go out and build your development, but you can't make it any worse than what it would be as if you weren't there in that particular year. So again, as you go across to the PM peak, as well as the Saturday peak, adding those improvements, it'll take us where we're actually less than what the pre-development conditions are. So that's the standard that PennDOT sets for us that we have to meet.
So they don't require you to get a C on the report card, a B or an A. D works.
Well, they tell you if you're maintaining a C or a B or an A, you have to maintain those. But again, the 10-second variance is really the standard that they set. If you increase it more than 10 seconds, most likely you're jumping to another level of service and you're doing something. So again, the 10 seconds is the latitude they give us. Because if you add one car to a network, you automatically are going to increase delay. There's no debate about that. So again, PennDOT has decided the 10-second threshold was what's considered as acceptable for them to accept.
What you gonna tell us what you have to do to get to your D? Are there improvements?
Yeah, that's going to be the conclusion. And then there's also reference in the report to Q analysis. What does that mean?
Again, is one of the additional analyses that PennDOT, Township, MPO make us look at is the Q analysis. And what that means is we have to make sure that traffic is not backing, say from a stop sign approach, it's not backing or blocking any adjacent street or driveway at a stop sign. And at a signal, it has to make sure that we have enough storage capacity in a particular lane. So if a left turn lane is 150 feet, and we determine that we need 175 feet of storage, we have to add 25 feet of storage to that lane. If there's 175 feet and it comes out to 150 feet, we don't need to do any type of improvement to that particular lane. So again, the Q analysis looks at our 2031 build conditions with all the levels of traffic built on, and we look at what's considered as the 95th percentile Q. So it's not the average, it's even the 95th percentile what that data shows. So again, on table 14, as well as table 15, table 14 basically shows all the turning movements and lanes. It shows what those existing turn lanes are. We also talk about what some of the proposed lanes are going to be, but we're able to accommodate all the traffic within what's either the existing turn lane bay length or what we're proposing to build as an improvement under 2031 conditions.
I'm sorry.
Nope.
Folks, you are delaying this whole process. You need to stop talking. This is a court procedure, record is taken. I do not want to keep stopping the witness to tell everybody to be quiet.
And then one other thing before we get to the improvements, what is an auxiliary turn lane analysis?
Again, that's one of the last analyses that PennDOT makes us look at. What they want us to do is evaluate our site access points to make a determination if a left turn lane or a right turn lane is needed along the major highway. Again, we conducted that analysis at the two site access points as well as at Carlisle Pike and Kaplan Court. Since our access does come off of Kaplan for the smaller warehouse, we needed to determine if a turn lane was needed at that particular intersection.
And then turning now to the last 2 pages of the executive summary, I believe it's Romanette 8 and Romanette 9 and Romanette 10, those pages of the executive summary at the beginning of the traffic impact study. Item 11 mentions a number of roadway improvements, and are those the roadway improvements to the 4 intersections at the beginning of that section that are being recommended to mitigate, as we discussed, the mitigate any degradation in the levels of service?
Yes, all the intersections are listed. Ones where improvements are not warranted or identified as such, but the other 4 identify specific improvements.
And then turning to Exhibit 11 in the exhibit booklet, and we also have boards if you want to use the boards.
Van White.
Can you talk us through these different improvements? I think that's the first one, yeah.
Thanks, Eric. You'll beat my Van White. The first exhibit, as you see, is the access point off of Route 30. As you can see, that the driveway is aligned directly opposite of Stanley Drive. What that shows is a proposed full access boulevard type of driveway with one entering lane 14 feet wide and one exiting lane at 14 feet wide. The radiuses are designed at 65 and 55 foot radiuses to accommodate a WB62 combination tractor trailer truck, making a right in or left in. As you'll see, as you head westbound, it was required from the auxiliary turn lane analysis a 175 foot right turn lane. So it shows the right turn lane. There's a 100 foot taper that transitions from the shoulder. We are also providing a 5 foot bike lane that carries from the shoulder and separates the right turn lane from the through lane. PennDOT has been mandating lately when we do right turn lanes to put bike lanes in. So it's a 5 foot wide bike lane. It has the bike symbol in there, and it provides an area for a bicyclist that's using the shoulder to continue in their lane and not get caught up in the right turn lane of people turning. So that's the proposed improvements at that intersection. There's no traffic signal proposed. The volumes do not dictate the need for a signal. If you review the levels of service, you see we have an acceptable level of service. Traffic signals are regulated and controlled by PennDOT. We don't have the ability, nor does the township have the ability to say we want a signal there to put a signal there. It has to meet specific criteria established by the FHWA, which the state has adopted, and PennDOT has adopted other criteria above and beyond the feds for warranting a signal. So the intersection does not meet warrants for a signal under 2031 build conditions. So what you see on that graphic is what would be proposed as part of the PennDOT highway occupancy permits. Again, these are just concept drawings. They're not engineered out. It doesn't get into the details of drainage or any items like that. It just pretty much shows a horizontal layout. No. Go to the up on 94.
And And for those following along at home, this is page 3 of Exhibit 11.
So what this board shows, this shows the orientation of 94 from left to right is south to north. Where the dark black portion of the roadway exists to the south is basically where the current 3-lane center turn lane section of 94 starts. So basically what we're picking up is we're picking up a center turn lane all the way from that point up to the main entrance into the proposed access into the site onto the east side of 94. Again, there was a northbound left turn lane that was warranted at Kaplan. Right now, there's no left turn lane there. It's basically 2 lanes. So this would involve constructing a left turn lane, basically the continuation of the center left turn lane into Kaplan Court. Coming southbound, it warranted a 125-foot right turn lane. So the right turn lane would be constructed, as well as, again, the 5-foot bicycle lane that goes through. The shoulders would be required to meet PennDOT's width, and the width of the shoulders would be 5 feet out here. So again, it's a continuation of the bike lane through there. So again, that is what the requirements were for that particular intersection based on adding the smaller warehouse on Lot 1. Again, our traffic cons takes into account traffic using Kaplan Court now. It takes into account all the background traffic we talked at. Again, from a level of service point of view, this intersection operated at an acceptable level of service. It does not warrant for a traffic signal at this location. So again, there's no traffic signalization warranted at this particular location. If you continue to the north, where Eric is pointing, that is the main access, the secondary access into the warehouse site for Lot 2. Again, that site, and then flipping to the next, the one there's a match line. You can hold them maybe next to each other. That kind of shows as you're coming south on 94, basically a 125-foot left turn lane was warranted into the driveway. And again, that's a full access driveway. Again, the radiuses are designed to accommodate WB62s, which are combination tractor trailers, to make those turns to stay in their own lanes and not encroaching on any of the other opposing lanes. So basically the areas, what you see in the dark black, are pretty much the improvements that ultimately would be part of the HOP package for the access points into the site. If you pull up the other one. As I indicated before, and I used the example of the 30 and 94 intersection, with the level of service, we had a drop or an increase of delay greater than 10 seconds. So in order to meet that, in order to offset that, we had to look at what improvements we could do out there. Basically, the intersection now, except for the southbound movement, all have left, straight, and right turn lanes. If you look at the volumes coming up 94 making the right are extremely high. We're talking probably over 220, 230 right turns in the afternoon peak that come up 94 and make a right turn. So in order to mitigate that particular level of service, if you look back in the level of service table, you'll see that was a level of service F for that particular movement. What we're recommending to do is to create a second right turn lane. So basically to have 2 or dual right turn lanes. So when you would come up there, and again, there's 2 receiving lanes, as those turns would turn right on the 30 to go east, there's 2 receiving lanes that they could both make their turns simultaneously to continue on there. They recently did this improvement in York at North Hills Road. I think it's North Hills. They widened that to create 2 lanes to turn onto 30 there. So it's a very similar type of operation. It would be set up such that, again, you couldn't make a turn on red because you have 2 lanes. But again, we're looking to create a second right turn lane, and we would start that basically at the Turkey Hill driveway and extend that north to create 2 lanes, basically 175 foot of additional northbound right turn lane. Again, as part of that, that radius would need to be improved. The signal pole would need to be relocated. A lot of the whole corner of that intersection would need to be reconstructed. The signalization, there's signalization timing changes that would need to be done at the intersection to accommodate this, phasing changes. So that was our improvement we did at the intersection, as well as look at the timings and optimizing the timings. Like any other traffic signal you put in, when the signal's put in or it's updated, there's a certain set of counts that were done and timings are based on that. Over time, as development comes online, new projects come online, those volumes can shift from what they originally were, and the timings may not be optimized. Again, PennDOT requires us to optimize those times so we get the most effective use of the green on the arrows, on the through movements, the side streets. So again, we optimize the timings in addition to this improvement in order to get our point of mitigating that 10 seconds of additional delay.
And with the, in the development process, who will pay for these improvements?
The gentleman to my left.
Nice job.
And
Is that the applicant?
The applicant.
yeah, yes. And will these improvements need to be completed to PennDOT's satisfaction before an occupancy permit may be issued by the township for the buildings?
Typically, that's how it's done. Again, we're dealing with access points into a site. Of course, if you're going to open the site, all the improvements need to be done to accommodate traffic entering and exiting the site. They do give a little leeway if you're working through, as you can see from the exhibits at the Turkey Hill, the applicant's going to have to acquire some additional right-of-way from that property owner in order to do those improvements. So again, as PennDOT wants to make sure things are moving along, if that's underway and maybe not 100%, again, that's a discretion of the township when it comes to an off-site improvement like that. But the site access improvements, yes, they need to be done and completed and operational by the time the site would open.
And was the traffic impact study prepared in the testimony you gave this evening to the best of your professional knowledge?
Yes, it was.
In your professional opinion, will the developments of lots 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the subject property with the traffic improvements recommended in the traffic impact study, will they in any way adversely impact the health, safety, and welfare of the community in a way not normally generated by warehouse use?
That is correct.
And they will not, they will not adversely impact the health, safety, and welfare?
Yes, they will not.
Okay. I have no further questions for Mr. Schick.
Mr. Graham, cross-exam of Mr. Schick.
Yes. Mr. Schick, when you prepared this study, this was, your crash data was based on reportable crashes and intersections, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. In the distance from Route 30 at Cross Keys to Dix Dam Road and Route 30 at Cross Keys to Bear Road, did you take into consideration mid-block crashes?
We looked at the segments that are adjacent to the entrance, both on 30 and 94. PennDOT made us look at that one particular segment. So the intersections, we looked at a distance of 200 feet in all directions. And then we looked at the segments, identified where the site access. So if it was segment 390, that's the segment we looked at.
Okay, so mid-block crashes were not identified from Cross Keys to Dix Dam Road or Cross Keys to Bear Road?
No, it was specifically that segment along, it would be, again, west of 94. I don't know the exact limits of it, of that particular segment, but no, it doesn't extend to the west of the intersection.
Okay, and would it surprise you that the majority of the crashes on those two sections of roadway are not intersection crashes? They are in fact mid-block crashes.
I would take your word for it.
Okay. Your table 7, 545 trucks then daily between the two terminals. Where did that number come from?
That number came from the ITE trip generation. They have specific trip generation for trucks in their manual. So again, it's based on the square footage of the facility, and they have the same type of trip generation as they do for passenger cars, but they also break it down for trucks.
Okay, and what type of material handling is involved in generating how many trucks can go in and out at a warehouse every day?
I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, those numbers are based on how many trucks can go in and out of a warehouse of how many square footage, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that is also based on the material handling, correct? If all your trucks are being loaded and unloaded conventionally with forklifts, you can only handle so many trucks a day. Whereas if they're unloaded by computerized handling systems, you can unload many more.
The IT trip rates are based on studying, I believe it's 50 to 60 different warehouses across the country. They don't classify them based on how materials are loaded or unloaded. They're based on square footage. So what they do when they do a trip generation study, they look at a specific time period. If it's the morning peak between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., they look at the total traffic coming and going. So it's kind of a homogenized rate of various types. They don't create separate trip rates based on the unloading or loading materials. Again, this is a basic warehouse type of use, so it doesn't go into that level of detail. So there is no standard that does that.
Okay, but between the two methods of material handling, automation can certainly increase how many trucks can go in and out of that site every day, correct?
I would tend to agree with you. Again, I have no information backing that for the numbers, but it
Okay,
makes sense.
all right. And this traffic study, it has not been reviewed by PennDOT, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Does the cross-exam questions, does that generate any questions on your part for the applicant?
Just one, Mr. Schick, there's questions about with the standard you were using for determining truck traffic. Is the standard that you used the industry standard?
Yes, that's the industry standard, and that was discussed at the scoping meeting between all parties, between Township, the county, as well as PennDOT and us.
I have no further questions for Mr. Schick.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Schick? Jeff,
Table 3.
get on the mic there. It's your one chance.
No, I'm a drummer.
Oh, that's right.
On table 3, your traffic count, so turning movement count, you just did a count on one day Thursday and one day Saturday,
That's correct.
okay? And you did state on record that your weekday PM trips were counted up to 6 PM. Your table here says 4 PM.
That particular table where you're looking at the intersection peak hour, that is the peak hour during that 3-hour window we looked at. If you look at the paragraph before that, the AM peak counts were conducted between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. The PM peak were done between 3 and 6, and the Saturday between 11 and 3. What is shown in table 3 in the far right column is the highest hour of that window the traffic was counted. So again, when we do our analysis, we're looking at the worst case scenario. So as you can see, the intersection of 30 and 94, the morning peak hour there occurs at 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. If you go to York and Stanley, the intersection there is 6:45 to 7:45. Likewise, on other pages, pretty much everything is between 7 and 8. Again, it varies in the afternoon, some between 3:30 and 4:30, some between 4:15 and 5:15. But again, rather than taking 1 hour across the window of all our intersections, we're required to take the highest hour at each individual intersection. So again, we're looking at worst case scenario when traffic is the highest at that particular intersection. So that's what that number is, or time is on the right.
Okay, and then the AM went up to 8 AM, and that was it? You stopped there?
No, we went to 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock?
9 o'clock.
Okay. Back to the big table, 13, I think it is. Yeah. Okay. Next table, 14. The same intersection, northbound right turn lane, there's a proposed second 175-foot turn lane. So is that what this exhibit is showing that one?
That is correct. That's correct.
Having lived in this area for 24 years and driving through that intersection for 24 years, that's probably the best turn lane out of that whole intersection. It's the straight through lanes that back up on all four directions. So I'm not saying your numbers are wrong, but something's not right if I've drove through here for 24 years.
Well, you gotta remember, what we're showing in there in storage, if you look at the second column in, it gives what the storage is. So say, for instance, the northbound through has a distance of 815 feet, and that's from the intersection to the nearest public roadway. So that's how we're required to look at. So it's 815 feet. So let's say we know PM peak is the worst time. So if we look at the PM peak under existing conditions, I guess I look at the base condition, it's 637 feet. The projected, when we add our traffic, it goes to 692 feet. So we're still less than the 815 feet. So again, each one of those numbers, if you look at what the existing distances are, and then what the projected, either with improvements or without improvements, we are less than what's being provided. And now again, this is an average of the 95th percentile over that entire hour. There may be certain periods, a 5-minute window where it does exceed, but again, this is the 95th percentile of that full 60 minutes of traffic entering the intersection.
Okay.
And again, that's,
The areas that you studied, did you add the Brethren home at all? There were expansions over there. Did you add any extra traffic counts into the Brethren home?
if there were studies done, that wasn't one of the studies that were listed. So anything that was done and built and operating is included in our background traffic. So that traffic's already on the network itself.
So they had no other subdivision plans in for any expansions?
There was nothing provided to us at the meetings. And
Okay.
again, we had Oxford, Berwick, Hamilton was there, and the county was there. So this was kind of a combination of everybody providing us this information.
Okay. And Royal Farms was not figured into this either?
That's correct.
Were their plans withdrawn?
It was not, and actually, I was working on the traffic study for that. The plan was not actually withdrawn. It was, I'll say Royal Farms
It's on hold?
shelved or held, or I'm not sure what the right word you would say. It's not pursued, but again, the owners of that property are continuing to look for people to develop that particular site. We went through the scoping stage with that project. A lot of conversation, we talked about access, was for them to coordinate access with our site. If you see the site plan, you can see behind the two commercial lots, there's a stub of a road that goes over to their property line. So in the future, if something does occur there, the applicant has agreed to allow that connection to occur, to come out to there. It's potentially, if something goes in there that's a large generator, it could generate enough traffic that a traffic signal would go at Stanley. So again, PennDOT was very concerned with their access into that site. As you're aware, most convenience stores, they want 10 access points. PennDOT wasn't going to give it to them, so I think they were a little concerned. They were also looking to put truck diesel on that particular site. Again, made it very difficult for the staging of trucks to enter and exit the site, the park, to use the convenience store. There was other uses on there, so there was a lot of traffic being generated by that. Again, we were working on that project. We haven't touched it since probably late July of last year. Checked with them. Again, they're continuing to pursue people. They own the property. They want to develop it, but again, they're trying to find somebody that's willing to take it.
So they submitted a HOP and they were denied. You were submitted a HOP for Royal Farms?
No.
You never did
No,
for
we-
Royal Farms?
No, we actually went through the scoping stage. We got an approved TIS scope like we have here. We prepared a traffic impact study, submitted it, got comments back, and that's where it died in session at that point.
Okay, all right.
There was a lot of issues of access. They wanted their own access. That would have been between Stanley and Wendy's, and, you know, it would have warranted a signal there, or they weren't allowed to get left turns on, so it created a lot of access issues for those particular tenants.
Right, okay. I thought they denied the.
No, it never got to a point where it was accepted or not. It
Review.
was still in the review process.
Okay. That's all I got.
Does Mr. Stiles' questions generate any questions that you guys have or comments, Mr. Green? You're not up yet, sir. Hold your hand.
I have one quick question. Back on table 13, you pulled out the ILOS of York Road and Carlisle Road and showed how it would come up to save, it would be 10 seconds less. That was at AM peak time, but if you go further across where it says PM peak, am I reading it wrong, or isn't the base 47.2 and the projected 51.9? That's not 10 seconds less, is it? Or am I reading it wrong?
No, you're 100% correct. It's, again, we did not exceed, if that would have been 57.2, we would have had to mitigate. However, the 51.9 shows what the increase or the decrease in delay is with our improvements. We don't have to mitigate. Let's say we didn't have to do any mitigation out there. That would have met PennDOT standard. We didn't exceed 10 seconds of delay, so if that ILS under projected conditions would have been 57.2, then we would have had to mitigate. However, it was less than that, we did not have to, but again, we just show what the difference of the intersection level of service is once you implement our proposed improvements.
Okay. Mr. Schick, are you a professional traffic engineer?
No.
Okay, so how are you guys meeting that requirement, David?
It was prepared. Dave Hoagland is my supervisor.
If you look at the traffic impact study,
On the front cover, yeah.
it says it was prepared by John under the direction of Dave Hoagland, UP.
Hold on.
It's on the second page.
The exhibit, John.
Prepared by Mr. Schick under the direction of David Hoagland, PE. So by David watching what you did, you argue that you meet the requirements in the ordinance for the professional engineer.
Correct, yes.
What's the level of service currently of that intersection right there, the Cross Keys intersection? What's the grade it gets right now?
The grade he gets right now, in the overall intersection in the morning, it's a level service D, as in dog, with 39.6 seconds. In the afternoon, again, it's a D, 41.1, and on a Saturday, a C, 33 point.
And when your warehouses, if they go in and are fully up and running, what's the letter grades for that intersection?
It'll still in the AM be a D with a delay of 48.6 seconds. In the PM peak, it will be a D as in dog with 51.9, so roughly 9.8 seconds increase of delay, overall delay. Again, that's for all four movements of the intersection. And then on a Saturday, it goes from a C 33.7 to a D 40.3. But again, that also includes all the background development of those four developments, as well as background growth of traffic too.
So that change on a Saturday from a C to a D doesn't require you guys to do
It
anything?
does not. It's the 10-second rule is what it's called.
Mr. Graham, do my questions raise any questions for you to ask? Do my questions generate any more questions for you?
No, sir.
David?
No, can I have the mic? I have no further questions for Mr. Schick. I'd like to, in the 1 minute we have left, just ask Mr. Brinzer one more question.
Let's talk about this for a second. Are you comfortable with this being our break point where we would have to come back?
Yes.
I'm likely going to rest after I ask Mr. Brinzer one more question. Mr. Brinzer, could you pull up the rendered site plan? Just to go back to the discussion about the variance, given the shape of the property and, yeah, that one. Given the shape of the property and the environmental constraints such as the wetlands, the streams, and the slopes of the property, is there another better location closer to any of the front yards that a building that a viable commercial building could be constructed on the property?
Viable commercial or warehouse?
A viable, for a building this, for a lot this size, to viably use a lot this size.
Not for warehouse use.
Okay. And given that the property is...
Dave, use the mic, because you're a soft
Yeah,
talker.
given that the property is currently about 60-some acres, would another commercial use really be appropriate for a property this size?
Probably not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna keep the record open. You haven't rested.
I have not rested.
We haven't heard from the township yet, so we're gonna recess to another date to be determined. You guys can't talk about it, can't take any additional evidence, and you gotta just, this is what we got to work with till we reopen.
John, can we choose the date now so we don't have to advertise?
We could try.
Put it on the record now?
You think we could come up with a hearing date tonight while we're here on the record without having to re-advertise? Do you know your schedule?
I know my schedule, if you think we're within the law.
Not to advertise.
As long as we announce it during the opening of, the record's open tonight, yes. So Thursdays are the best. 2 weeks from now? You guys need to be able to attend too, obviously.
Yeah, that's the problem. I don't have my schedule. We have a calendar.
Good?
That'd be the 11th.
You good?
There's 11th or 18th.
I will not be here. We might not have a board. 11?
I think, I'm not positive.
Jeff? No, we got 3 head shakes on this board, no. So
Littlestown Planning Meeting.
next Thursday, the following Thursday.
18th.
18th, I'm fine. I'm done with book that night anyways already.
Do we need you? Do you need him? Yeah, I guess we do, because we'll probably have to question. So I had a note for you. It's gonna be like, herd and fleas. What else we got?
You're the 25th unless you want to get on Wednesday.
You won't get me if you don't stay on Thursday. 25th?
In Charlotte.
All right, let's try a Wednesday then.
The 10th
I'm not available that whole week. I'm not available the week of the 8th.
I cannot do the 10th.
All right,
or we have the
I'm gonna
17th.
shoot.
Oh, we have Monday, 15, 16, 17, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Do you want to?
We're just gonna re-advertise it. We're gonna
Yeah,
spend, I wanna be home, we'll still be picking a date by 11.
Yeah, I live an hour and a half away.
All right. Everybody in attendance, the record is still open. No decision will be made. Come back, watch for the advertisement and the postings. Please come back to attend.